Happy Mother's Day, everybody, and Tony here with a review of Richard Strauss's Der Rosenkavalier, live streamed from the Metropolitan Opera House, which I saw last night at the Kino in der Kulturbrauerei. The conductor was Sebastian Weigl, the production was done by Robert Carson, the sets were done by Paul Steinberg, the costumes were done by Brigitte Reifenstuhl, the lights were handled by Peter van Pret and Robert Carson, the choreographer was Philippe Giraudeau, and the filmographer was Gary Halverson. I was really anticipating this particular production of Rosenkavalier because this was Renée Fleming's final Marschallin and of course Elina Garanca's final Octavian. Aside from these two singers who I was very excited to see last night, there was also a star-studded cast which also featured Aaron Morley, Markus Brück, Günther Kreuzbuck, and Matthew Polenzani. I'll get to them later, but first, my thoughts on the production. Mr. Robert Carson transported the action of Rosenkavalier, which originally took place in the 18th century, and transported all the way up to Richard Strauss's time, which was somewhere in the early 20th century, at the height of World War I, where we also see some cannons being used. And Baron Ochs is not only a baron by name and status only, but he's also like a commander of his own troop, which is also why there are some cannons being pushed in on stage from time to time. And I also kind of like the backdrops. In the first act, we see that the entire wallpaper is in red, with some pictures of the Marschallins, uncles, nephews, and a lot of other relatives which she has. And I also love the luxuriousness of the first act. And what's also quite interesting about the second act scenography is that it basically feels like I'm playing chess, as in it's all black and white in terms of its designs. And there are times that during the scene with Octavian and Sophie, there is a waltz in the background, even though I did find that tiny detail a little bit too much because this was supposed to be an intimate moment between Octavian and Sophie. I kind of found it to be lovely in its own special way to show the tenderness and the innocence that these two teenagers have. And instead of the entire third act taking place in some inn, it is basically taking place in a brothel where the innkeeper is in drag and he is basically a procurer to a host of prostitutes, which was quite out there in my opinion. But I guess they were just trying something really, really new without being way too shocking. And what I noticed about Octavian's Mariandel costume is that in the first act, he basically dresses her up as some sort of Jerry Flapper dancer, while in the third act, he makes her have a wig and makes her almost similar to either Marlene Dietrich or even that of Marilyn Monroe. And I thought the costumes looked really, really gorgeous on each of the singers. They all looked very, very lovely. And there was just a sense of really fine patterns being used. I especially love the Marschallin's absolutely gorgeous black gown and Octavian's choice of clothing, which suited him very, very handsomely. And I also have to give loads and loads of kudos to the costume and makeup department, especially for what they designed for Octavian. Elina Garanca, who played Octavian, well, she really looked like a young gentleman, and she didn't really look like a woman at all. So they really knew what type of strengths they had to pinpoint, especially when it comes to the cheekbone structure and how she managed to move around on stage. And not only did they focus on a lot of the external aspects of what Octavian should look like, but also a lot of the internal aspects as well. So overall, Robert Carson's production of Rosenkavalier was very, very interesting. It's quite lavish in its own special way. It managed to take risks from time to time, but at the same time, it stuck really, really well with the score. And what's also interesting is that Mahomet, the young servant of the Marschallin, isn't played by a black kid, which he's always played by, but a Middle Eastern teenager, which I found very interesting. So I'm not going to mince words here. The production, when it comes to the sets, concept, and costumes, they were just absolutely fine and interesting all around. And now we get to the singers, the very part of this review I am very excited to talk about. Starting off with Renée Fleming as the Marschallin. My first experience with Madame Fleming was when I was 10 years old, and I first heard her rendition of O mio babino caro, and I was completely enthralled by her voice. Not only is she completely glamorous on stage with her luscious eyes, blonde hair, and just really knowing how to use glamour to her advantage, but her voice is equally glamorous. It is a full lyric soprano voice, creamy and rich throughout all the registers, and quite flexible. She really has one of the most wonderful voices I have ever heard, and when it comes to her appearances on television, I find her to be quite humorous and quite down to earth, which is something I really love in Renée Fleming. I really thought that she did an amazing job as the Marschallin, a role that she has been singing for many years, and this is one of her signature roles, aside from the likes of Arabella, also from Richard Strauss, and even the likes of Desdemona from Verdi's Otello, Rusalka from Dvorak's Rusalka, and many other roles suited to her creamy, rich, flexible, and lovely full lyric soprano voice. She showed no signs of aging, no signs of trouble in her voice and her singing, and she was just so awesome as a singer from beginning to end. She was focused throughout all the registers. She had not one vocal flaw whatsoever, and she was just mellifluous in her singing and very, very precise when it comes to her phrasing. And as someone who's glamorous like Renée Fleming, she really knew how to take advantage of what glamour she has in her presence, and she put it to great use. She was just wonderful as a singing actress, and she really oozed with nobility, charm, beauty, and as always, she was just, simply put, a vocal goddess. Elina Garanca was in equally top form as Octavian. What more can I say about Madame Garanca? I really love the full-bodied cello tone of her voice. I really love those viola-sounding high notes. And she was just a very great musician all throughout. There are times I'm not always a fan of her acting because there are times that she can be quite samey in terms of her expressions, but she managed to do a very great job with Octavian, as she's always done for all these years that she has been singing this role. And now that she is basically giving up the trouser roles, she's now heading towards a lot of these more dramatic mezzo roles and a lot more feminine roles like Santuzza and Eboli and maybe even a Dalila in the near future, which I'm sure she's also booked. So overall, what more can I say about Renée Fleming and Elina Garanca as the Marschallin and Octavian? Their chemistry was very superb, both vocally and dramatically. Though it's pretty sad to see them say farewell to their signature roles, I guess it's kind of for the best because I'm sure that these two are exploring a lot of different repertoires and they're trying to explore new chapters in their careers as singers. And here's me wishing them all the best and all of my love for everything they have to do. And what about the other singers? Well, they were equally as wonderful. Erin Morley as Sophie van Faninal was absolutely gorgeous with her lovely lyric coloratura soprano voice and her elegant yet feisty stage presence. I first knew this young lyric coloratura soprano when I first heard her on YouTube singing a snippet of Der Hölle Rache, aka the Queen of the Night's second act aria, and the Pamina was Ekaterina Surina. This was live from Santa Fe, and it was a very fine first impression from what I can get from her voice. She specializes in the lyric coloratura soprano repertoire, not just with roles like Queen of the Night and Olympia, but also the likes of Lucia from Lucia de la Marmore, Marguerite de Valois from Merber's Les Huguenots, and recently Cunegonde from Leonard Bernstein's Candide. What I really love about Erin Morley as Princess Sophie von Faninal is just the amount of vibrance that she gives to this character. She was flighty, she was youthful, she was charming, she was absolutely full of life, and she was just so wonderful all throughout. I definitely bought her in this role. She had a lovely stage presence, and she had such a fine chemistry with Elina Garanca's Octavian, and their final duet was just so heart-meltingly gorgeous. I almost felt a tear run down through my eyes, and it was just a very fine rendition of the final duet of Rosenkavalier. So I'm not going to mince words here. Erin Morley was just absolutely fabulous as Sophie van Faninal. Markus Brück was absolutely wonderful as Herr von Faninal, and this was also his Met Opera debut, and boy did he have such a ball in that particular role. He was able to really fill up the house quite well, and his stage presence was very, very alluring in his own special way, and he was absolutely involved in the character. I can definitely tell that this gentleman had a lot of fun playing this particular father figure, and I could definitely see it in the charisma he gives, the absolutely wonderful tones he produced, and he was just a great singing actor, as he's always been. Günter Greusbuch's Baron Ochs was handsomely sung with virility, masculinity, and he was just excellent as he's always been. What I noticed about this particular Baron Ochs is that he really does play his age, like 35. Usually the role of Baron Ochs is played by a much older singer, like someone in his 50s or 60s or 70s, and for the most part it's a buffo part. But lest one forget, Baron Ochs is about 3 years older than his cousin, the Marschallin, making him about 35 years old. And to see someone like Günter Greusbuch give him that great amount of virility and that great amount of masculinity, and at times a slight intimidation in terms of this part, was really quite fresh in the way he executed this particular role. He was able to find some light moments in Ochs, but he was able to make him quite demanding and quite domineering at times, thus making this role quite multifaceted, and he was able to bring in something very, very interesting to this otherwise buffo part. But more than anything, it's his vocal assets that really make him stand out as Ochs. He has one of the finest basso cantante slash profondo voices I have ever heard, and he has a very well focused and grand sounding voice that's very, very great for all of these noble yet at times villainous and maybe at times benevolent characters. He did a very, very great job embodying Ochs, and he was just a dream to witness. Matthew Polenzani was fine as always as the Italian tenor. His voice, while at times throaty in some areas, managed to be very, very well tuned. It has those fine and clean attacks, and he was just so fun as the Italian tenor. He basically molded this particular tenor in the likes of Enrico Caruso, and he did a very fine job in terms of his mannerisms. He did a very fine job with giving the Italian tenor a lot of mannerisms and not just making him stand up there and sing. But I really love his exit scene when he's interrupted by Os and he just gives some type of hand signal saying that he's warning him he better not step on his turf, which I thought was very, very hilarious. And he was also the host of last night's production of the Rosenkavalier. Doing something that's quite double duty may seem easier said than done, but I thought that Matthew Polenzani pulled it off quite well. Then we also go to Susan Nev's superb Marianne Leitmetzerin, whose sturdy and strong dramatic soprano voice was very, very solid all throughout. And I even heard her last year as the overseer from, of course, Richard Strauss's Elektra, the Patricia role production, which was also at the Met and which starred Waltraud Meyer, Nina Stemme, and Adrian Pejanka in the main heroines. And she managed to bring in a lot of life, vivacity, and enthusiasm to this otherwise small part. She was able to make Marianne Leitmetzerin very enthusiastic, quite charming, and even though at times her voice is quite shaky in some registers, her high notes and her mannerisms, her acting and singing were just well done all throughout. Helena Schneiderman was quite a riot as Anina. Her voice was absolutely gorgeous throughout all the registers. It still has that wonderful golden timbre, and she really knew how to find a lot of really wonderful moments with Anina. She has been specializing in a lot of lyric mezzo and comprimario mezzo roles for quite some time. I would say during the 70s, 80s, and probably at the latest 90s. And she's been specializing in those said roles in a lot of European opera houses, and especially when it comes to her career in singing in Germany, whether it be in Munich or Darmstadt, or even in a lot of these great German cities. She has made her career in Germany, and she's been very well known in singing a lot of these character mezzo roles. And what more can I say about Madame Schneiderman as Anina? She did a very, very fine job embodying this character, and she was just a lot of fun to watch. She was able to make her quite the fun and deliciously hilarious character, and she was just a very wonderful singing actress, as she's always been. Alan Oak was equally a riot as Valzacchi, as he did a very fine job just making this role hilarious in his own special way, quite sneaky. And what more can you expect from someone like Alan Oak, who is very, very famous in a lot of these character tenor parts? He did a very great job embodying Valzacchi, and he was just an absolute riot, along with Helena Schneiderman as Anina, as their chemistry just flourished all throughout. Every time I watch these two veterans, it's like watching fireworks on the 4th of July, just sparking here and there. They really had superb chemistry. We even have such really, really great singing from the likes of Scott Scully and Mark Showalter, who sang the two major domos, Scott Connor, who sang the police commissioner, James Courtney, who sang the notary, Tony Stevenson, who sang the innkeeper, and Anne Nonemacher, who sang the milliner. So overall, the singing was absolutely excellent all throughout. Not only from the principal roles sung by Renée Fleming, Elina Garanca, Aaron Morley, Markus Bruck, Gunther Grossbuck, and Matthew Polenzani, but also all the supporting singers. Each and every one of them did amazingly, and the conducting done by Sebastian Weigler was very, very well done. The same thing I can say about the chorus and orchestra of the Metropolitan Opera House, as they've always been in every single performance they're in. So overall, the 2016-2017 Metropolitan Opera season definitely went out with a bang with this beloved Richard Strauss opera, especially when you have the likes of Renée Fleming and Elina Garanca bidding farewell to their signature roles and heading to a lot of really awesome roles in their chosen repertoires. And here's to them exploring a lot of new content. And I also just want to say thank you, Madame Fleming and Madame Garanca, for the magic that you've done in your signature roles. And for those of you who have witnessed this particular production of Rosenkavalier, what did you think of it? Did you feel like Renée Fleming and Elina Garanca were the absolute superstars of that particular production? Did you feel like there was another singer who outshone them? Or did you feel like the performances weren't really as great as you would have loved them to be? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's all for now, and even though it's quite sad to say farewell to the old season of the Metropolitan Opera House's live in HD productions, there is an exciting lineup coming for the 2017-2018 Met Live in HD productions, from the likes of Bellini's Norma to Thomas Addis, The Exterminating Angel, and even the premiere of Jules Massenet's Cendrillon, starring Joyce DiDonato, Alice Coote, Kathleen Kim, Laurent Nori, and Stephanie Blythe. I am really excited for the next Met Live in HD productions, and I just literally can't wait. And to all the mothers out there, I hope you all had a very wonderful Mother's Day. And Mom, if you're watching this video, this is also dedicated to you. I hope you had a very, very wonderful day. Lots of love from me to you. And here's to a lot of really wonderful years to come. So cheers to all the moms out there. Live long and prosper. And good night, everybody.